My name is Brittany, and I am part of the customer happiness team here at Docparser. And this is our introduction to Docparser webinar. So for those of you that haven't yet used Docparser or are just getting started using Docparser, we're going to cover today how to get started and create your first parser. So if everybody can hear me, if anybody wants to write in the chat, let me know. Make sure everything's working as it should. All right, let's get started. All right, so what exactly is Docparser? Docparser is a cloud-based tool that takes the hassle out of manual data entry from documents. So it lets you create custom rules to extract text and table data from documents and images. And once the data is pulled, you can either download it or you can send it wherever it needs to go, like into your software, a spreadsheet, using webhooks. So who uses Docparser? Pretty much any business that works with documents. So we've seen it across a wide range of industries, from accounting and bookkeeping to retail, manufacturing, logistics. If there's any important data inside of a document, Docparser helps to get it out quickly and accurately. So it's also just not for ongoing workflows. We do see some teams use it for just one-time projects, like converting archived files or paper documents into digital format as well. So whether it's a part of your daily operations or a special project, Docparser can be very useful. So before we jump into it, I do just want to let you know that if you have any questions as we go along, you can feel free to drop them into the chat over there on the right of the screen, as well as in the questions panel. So either of those two sections are fine. We will have a Q&A at the end, so I'll go through your questions then. All right, so I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen, and we're going to get started into the demo. All right. Turn off the slides. Okay. All right. So one thing that I want to cover first here is our AI parser. So it is one of the most exciting features that we've added recently. It's incredibly user-friendly. It automatically creates extraction rules for you, which means you can go from upload to parse data in seconds with almost no setup required. And just before I get into how that works, I do just want to say something about it. So the AI parser is very clever, but it does rely on exact layouts of the document. So it focuses more on the position of the data rather than on keywords. So that means the future uploads have a different format or structure, it may not find the data correctly. So the upside is that it's fast, it's very easy to use, especially when your documents are consistent. And of course, if your documents ever need more flexibility or accuracy, you can always switch to custom rules. So we're going to cover both of those things today during the demo. All right, so let's get started. So we're going to just click here on create our first document parser. From here, we're just going to go ahead and check mark here over on AI enhanced. And we're going to choose our smart AI parser to use the template. So I'm just going to leave it with that default name, but you can always change that. And then we're going to go ahead and upload a file. Actually, first, we're going to check if there's any pages to keep or drop. So we do recommend before using the AI parser that if you're not looking to extract data from all of the pages in the document, that at this step, you do determine if there's any pages that you would like to drop or keep. And you can do that based on the range or the keywords in the file. So mine is only a 1 page. We'll keep all pages. And I'm going to go ahead and drop over just a sample file. All right, so once that is uploaded, we'll go ahead and click on continue. And we're going to end up here in the rules page. So you can see over here, we have now all of these rules were created for us for the data on the document. So I'm just going to exit out of here just so we can see what was actually extracted. So if we go over to the document page, from there, we're going to be able to see a preview of the data that was extracted. So we kind of get a better idea of where we're at with that. So you can see it did a really great job of grabbing the data from the file. So we have the date, we have the invoice number, we have who it was billed to, We have our line item. So some of these things might need a little bit of adjustment after the fact. We can get rid of this empty row, but it did a really great job of grabbing all that data. So as I mentioned, it is really intelligent. It can do a really great job with very consistent files. So now that I've shown you how to do that, we're going to go ahead now and just create a custom parser. So in this one, we're just going to go back to the main page here, and we're going to create all those, basically those same rules, but we're going to do it from scratch so you can see a little bit more how those rules work and what options you have. So we're going to create a new parser, and I'm going to start with a blank template. Yeah, at the end I can show you, Cherry. I'll show you at the end how to go back and then remove those pages. All right, so we're just going to give this a name. I'm going to call it invoice parser and click on continue. Again, so the next step here is going to be to then upload the documents. I'm going to upload 2 different samples to then create the rules with. So here, I'm just going to drag them over. And obviously, there is a number of different ways that you can automate the process of importing your documents. And I'm going to cover that during the integrations portion. So we'll just click on continue. So at this point, no rules will have been created like in the other parser. So from here, we're just going to go ahead and select which rules we want. So I'm going to start here from the invoices section, and I'm going to start with some of our really cool rules here, which are the invoice number and invoice date rules. So we'll start with this one. And how this rule works is a little different from what most of our rules work like. What it actually does is it uses a keyword-based. Is anybody else having glitchy audio? I don't know if there's anything I can do. Let me check. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Let me know. I changed one little thing. Let me see if it helps. Let me also, you know what? I'll turn off my video. Maybe that will help. Oops. Maybe that will help with some of the glitchiness. Okay. Let me know if that's okay. Perfect. Perfect. Better. Awesome. Okay. So just to recap, so we're looking at the invoice number rule. So this one works a little different than a lot of our other rules, where what's happening is we're looking at a dictionary of values that it could possibly be. So with the dictionary, this is what it looks like. If you switch it over to a language or to custom, you would see this option to then edit the dictionary. And what we have here is our search terms on the left, and on the right, we have our value position. So this is what we would find on the document or any of these. And on the right, where is that going to be? So is it going to be the nearest match, next word on same line, somewhere right or below? So we can actually see on this particular file, it's not actually finding the right value. So what I'm going to do is just take what this document has, so the invoice number, that one, and I'm just going to replace this first one. So it is somewhere right or below. Once we click save, we're going to see that now it is finding that correct value. So this can be modified. Like I said, you can also use a custom one. At the bottom, you can always add additional search keywords if you need as well. This works great if maybe some of your documents are just the slightest bit different across them, but other things remain the same. So this would be a great rule to use for something like that. So we'll go ahead and save that rule. And then we're going to move on and create another rule. So the next one we're going to do is very similar. That one is the invoice date. So this, again, works in the same way. It has a dictionary that's looking for common terms that we might see on an invoice. So if I switch again over to English, we have our dictionary option open up, and you can see again on the left all those search terms, and on the right again where the value might be in relation to that. So again, always can add different search keywords. So this one is working just right off the bat. So we don't really need to make any changes here. You will notice that in this particular rule type, we have 2 results. So on the left, we have the match. So the match is going to be, this is the way the date looked on the file. So you can see it's the same. And on the right, we're going to have our formatted year, month, day version of it. So I'm going to leave that just the way it is and save that one. So going into the next rule, we're gonna switch it up a little bit, and we're going to do a fixed position rule type. So this one is going to be a specific location on the file. What I like to do when I use this type of rule, though, is I like to combine it in a couple of other methods, basically. I don't know if this makes sense, but basically what we might do is we could do very specifically, we could do something like this, where we are just kind of going over top of the name that we want. But just out of best practice and experience, what I like to do is kind of use a larger area. So I'm kind of capturing if it does move up or down a little bit, and I'm going to then click confirm. So in this case, we now have the entire box, and we do need to do a little bit of extra filtering to make sure I'm only kind of getting the name. So I'm looking for the build to name for this rule. So the first thing I'm going to do is just define my start position. So this is where I'm going to tell it, where does the data actually start? So in this case, it's going to be after the term appears build to. So once we've done that, what I'm going to do to make sure I get the right line is I'm then going to go and I'm going to remove the empty lines. So that's going to then put the data that I want on row 1, which makes it just a lot easier in the next step to make sure that's what I get. So the next step is going to be define the end position. So the default is going to be end of line. So what does that mean? We're just grabbing the first row. So this line number 1. For this particular document, this is pretty much the only way that I could end the data. There's no real keywords or any other data points I could use to define the endpoint. So this is what I'll have to do. And it should work great. Usually the name is going to be 1 line. So then what I want to do here is actually give this rule a name. So just typing over in that rule section here, I'm going to type build to, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that one as well. So the next thing we're going to do, very similar, we're going to basically do that exact same step again with the fixed position. I'm going to try to get the address this time. So the build to address. So in this case, again, we're going to do just a larger box around the area it's likely to be. I went a little bit bigger this time. And again, we're going to first then define the start position. So we're going to go for build to. We're going to again remove any empty lines. And in this case, we kind of have 2 ways that we could then find the data. So we're going to again add another start position. Since I mentioned in the last rule, there's no real keyword in front of the address that's going to help me start where I kind of need to. So we could do 2 things with this rule. We're going to add another start position, and we could tell it to keep last X lines. So it's always just going to keep the last row that happens, or we can just say again after X lines. So in this case, again, after 1. So both of these end up at the same final result. If you sometimes maybe have 2 rows of an address, you would definitely want to use this one after X lines. If maybe other things happen, maybe sometimes there's a phone number in between, you might want to do the keep last X lines. It just really depends on the file and what's going to be more consistent on which one would work better. In this case, they both work. It doesn't matter too much. So once we have the address, I could save it like this. We do have a really great filter that gets a lot of use, which is called our normalized postal address. So that's here under more filters. So normalized postal address, what it's going to do is it's going to take this address, and we're just going to set it to automatic. And it's going to then put that in a format that is split. So we're going to have street number, street, city, if there was a state, mini one that would be there, or short form, full, country, everything kind of appears here now. So this is a really great way if you're inputting it into a system that you need to have those city, state, etc. separated out. You can use this filter to have that happen automatically, and it works really great most of the time. So we're going to then give this a name. So we'll call this build to address, and we'll go ahead and save. All right, now moving on to a different rule type. So the next rule type that we're going to cover here is going to be the variable position rule. So we've kind of covered how this works with the fixed position one where we're using keywords. But in this case, what we end up looking at the beginning is the entire file in its text format. So we're not using any selected area on the page. We're going to just rely 100% on keywords on the page. So with this one, we're going to go ahead and try to capture here, the payment method. So to do that, pretty much the same as that build to stuff, we're going to take that keyword. And in this rule, we already have those start and end position filters here. So we're going to add payment method as our start position. So you can see everything now that happened before that is gone. We're left with that first line being the payment method. And we have then our end position here already defined as end of line. And again, in this case, this is the best option. There's really no keywords that come after that that are going to work better. So this is the best way to do that. So that is the payment method rule. And again, we will save. All right, so the next thing that we're going to cover, and this might be the more complicated of the rule types, is going to be the table or line items rule type. So we have both of these options available. So table data is what it's called in some of the sections. In other sections, you might see it called line items. They're the same rule. It doesn't really make too much of a difference which one you pick. They're going to do the same thing. So with the table data rule, what we end up looking at here is the entire document with these red lines already kind of placed. So these red lines are the boundary definitions for the columns on the page. So we can just take these by hovering over them, clicking, and dragging them to where the columns are on the page. So at this point, if you have a very consistent document, what you could do at this point is you could take a selection area on the page and make it really easy for yourself in the next step and just select the area on the page where the items are. This does require that your document is very consistent in terms of the section where the line items are. Obviously, a lot of files are different depending on how many items are on there. The section might be bigger or smaller. So it's not necessarily best practice in that case. But if your document is not like that, I would definitely recommend using it. It does make it a lot easier going forward. I'm not going to use it in this case. So once we have the column lines defined, everything like this, we're going to click on confirm. In the next step, we then are able to define which rows we want to keep. So I can just kind of expand this a bit so we see a bit more. So looking at this, we can see that this is where the actual table data begins, from where the headers of the column are, and it ends here basically where the subtotal occurs. So in this case, because there are multiple lines for each item, the best thing that we can do is first try to isolate the table section itself. So to do that, we're going to go into the table filters. And if you notice, the filters are different now than in the previous rules because we are working with tables. So they do change up between text rules and table rules. So from here, we're going to choose the one called Keep Table Section. So what this is going to allow me to do is identify where the table begins based on the keywords and as well where it ends based on the keywords. So we're going to use where it says item description in the header as our beginning position for the table. And then we're going to use where it says subtotal to identify where it ends by. So once I place those in the filters, and you can see start section where column 2 contains item description, ends where column 3 contains subtotal, everything else on the page is now gone, and we're left with just what was in between those two keywords. And again, to make it a little bit easier, we can even go ahead and skip that first row with the header, so I'm left with just the items themselves. So now what we need to do to get this into a functional way for export is to then merge these rows. So you can see, like I mentioned, every single row basically has multiple lines per item. So we want to combine those into one row. So to do that, again, under the same section, add, remove, and merge, we're going to click group and merge. So this filter by default, and it is working by default here, is going to look for a value in column 1, and it's going to merge until it finds a value in column 1 again. You can change this at any point if you want, and you can define it for yourself where the columns or where the row section begins and where it ends. So you could choose, for example, where column 3 has a value, where column 4 has a value, or where column 5, any of these basically first, third, fourth, and fifth columns are enough for this table to identify where it's going to begin and identify that whenever that happens again is the new row again. So you can also change this to whenever cell conditions match. If maybe you only really want the first 2 rows, but if there's more, you don't want those, you can define where it ends as well to prevent getting extra data in there that you don't want. So you can also not have it be based, on where it just has a value. We have a number of other filters in here that allow you to define specifics about those columns and what value is in them. So for where column 5, for example, is an amount, would be another way that we could do that. And it's, again, I mean, they're all getting the same result, but depending on your file, it might be necessary to get a little more specific about what that value needs to be when the row begins. So the other option here that you have is to also change what the merge mode is. So it's going to start here by merging cell values, which, as you can see, it's basically combining everything into the row above it. So this is all combining into a single cell. You can change this to append horizontally as well. This is if not empty, it looks a little cleaner. You can change it to just append horizontally as well. What that does is it creates new columns to the right with the values from those additional rows. So for me, I do want it to merge the cell values. So then we also have this other filter that was already here. We don't actually need, so I can go ahead and remove it. So this is the final table. With the table rules, I would recommend just best practice while naming the column headers. This is going to make it a lot simpler for you in terms of integrations in your downloads to know what the actual columns are. So we'll go ahead and give these dates, or give these names, sorry, that one's date. Okay, and then we'll click apply. And so then you can see that they've all changed now at the top here to what I've defined it as. So I'm going to leave this rule, which is called table data, that works for me, and click it. So we're going to add one last rule type, and this is kind of going back full circle to the beginning with those keyword-based searches, and we're just going to add one more rule for the totals. So the total rule works very, very similar to the invoice number, invoice date rules that we talked about at the beginning. This one is going to look for the totals on the document. So we have subtotal, tax, and total. So you can see down here, it's finding the subtotal as net, the tax, and the total. And it's also giving us a confidence rating. It does also have a value for carriage, which would be shipping. So it's saying 100%. That basically just, it knows the math is mathing here, and that the net plus the tax is equaling the total. So if I show you again what this looks like, if we edit the dictionary, it's a slight bit different from those first ones that I showed you, where we have an extra value here for the field. So this is going to define, is the keyword the tax or the net or the total? And so it's a little bit longer. It's a really big dictionary that we have. But again, you can always add your own values or change things up in here if needed, if it's not finding the value as you need it to. So that rule automatically names itself. It's called totals. So we'll go ahead and save. All right, so those are all the rules that we're going to be creating during this portion. So I'm going to click now on prepare for export. What that's going to do is take those 2 documents that I uploaded, and it's going to put them back into the data parsing queue so that we can see all of that data and all the changes. And we can go ahead and preview how is that coming out. So we can see it looks really great. This was the first file I uploaded, and we have all of the data extracting perfectly. And then this was the one we used for the setup and as well extracting perfectly. So now that we've confirmed that the data is working the way that we want it to, we can go ahead and download it. So once you have the data parsed, if we go over here to downloads, we can select what type of file we want to download the data to. So we have these 4 options here, the XLS, CSV, JSON, and XML, that the data can be exported to. So we're going to create a link that we can click that's going to download the data into that file format on our computer. So I'm going to do an XLS, it's the most common one we have, and just give this a name. And then the first thing that we can modify about this rule is which data is it going to include in the download. So by default, it's going to choose the last 100 files, but we can change that to just the last file. We can choose up to 10,000 files included in a single download. We can choose based on when they were received. So these options here. And we also have this option at the bottom here, which is files received since last download. So what that one's going to do is remember basically what document was uploaded at the time that you downloaded, and any new files will be included the next time that you click the link. So it's a really great way to kind of prevent duplication in your downloads. So we'll just leave it as the default. I only have 2 files. So once we click here on advanced configuration, we have a few more settings that we can change about the download. So require authentication, that's going to determine whether or not you need to be logged in to Docparser to use the link and download the file. By default, you do need to be logged in to access that link. And then we're going to choose show labels. So this one is going to determine how the column headers are named inside of the download. So by default, it's going to choose the name of the field that we created as well as the column names, but you can have it be just only the column names. You can have no header whatsoever. And then we have include fields. So if we switch this over to select fields and output format, we can see that we have every single rule we created, as well as all this metadata here at the top. So this is just the data that Docparser has about the document, like the ID, the link to it on the server, when it was processed, things like that. So most people don't actually want this data. So we can go ahead and unselect all of those fields. We can also unselect any other fields we may not want. For example, with the invoice date, if you recall, we had 2 columns. We can unselect the match one and only export this one. And then on the right, we can determine what that would be formatted as inside of the download itself. So we can change that one to be a date to make sure that in the Excel, it's formatted correctly. So we can also change this, for example, to an integer number, whatever we need to make sure that is formatting correctly. We have additional options here at the bottom, like sorting. How do you want the documents to be sorted? And do you want an email when the download is completed? So this is mainly for when you have a very large file download that might take a lot of time. You can have that emailed. We can also use these settings, the default download, which I'll show you once we're done. So when you're on the Documents tab, you can download with the same format. So once all of those are selected, we can click Save. And then from there, we now have this link created for us where the file will download if we select it. So I'm going to click on that and download the file. And then once that's done, I'll go ahead and open it and show you what that looks like. All right, just give me a second to get that open. Okay, here we go. So that looks like this. So we can see our 2 files. We have a row per item that was on the document. And it's pretty straightforward, I think, and simple. So this is obviously a more manual way to export the data that you have from Docparser. But obviously a lot of what people want with Docparser is going to be to automate this process. So to do that, we have our integrations. So with the integrations, before I get into how we're going to send the data outbound, I do just want to cover briefly how we can get the documents into Docparser. So to get them into Docparser, we have a few different methods that you could use. The first one here that you see at the top is our direct integrations. So the direct integrations are with cloud drives, ones like Google, OneDrive, Box, and Dropbox, where you can have a folder inside of those places that is watched by Docparser, and about every 10 to 15 minutes, any new documents that arrive in that folder will import into Docparser and then process. So that's a really common and easy way to import your files. You can also integrate with different platforms like Zapier, Power Automate, Workato, Make, and Claris. So if your systems that you already use connect via any of these, you can connect through them to then upload your document into Docparser in an automatic way through those. And then for custom integrations, we have our inbound email option. This is very common. A lot of people use it. If you're receiving your documents already via email, you are able to set up automatic forwarding from your email client to then send that automatically when it's received into Docparser. So you get a unique email address that you can forward to, and any attachments that we find in those emails will be imported as well to that person. So as well on top of that, for custom, we have FTP servers, so you can import from there, or you can always use an API as well to send that in. So those are all the options we have to get your documents into Docparser. Now for getting the data out of Docparser, we have our outbound integrations. So these are direct integrations. We have one with Google Spreadsheet or Microsoft Excel, so you can add new rows to spreadsheets in either of those two places automatically as the documents process. You can also create new records inside of Salesforce as well. So these are our direct ones. You can also, similar to inbound, use these integration platforms to connect outbound to any of those to create new leads, records, whatever you need to do in any of those systems using any of those options as well. And then again, for a more custom solution, we have our webhook. So you can use a simple webhook or an advanced webhook to send the data to any endpoint. We can also do with an FTP server as well. And then as always, you can always pull and use the API as well to send your data. So those are all the different ways that you can import or export your document or data outside of Docparser. So for today, we're going to cover one of our most common integrations, which is going to be our Google spreadsheet. So I'll show you how to create this and how that works. So with the Google spreadsheet, the first thing you do is connect your Google account. So that's already done. From here, we're going to link to an existing spreadsheet. You can also just create a new spreadsheet when you first set this up. I already have one, so we're going to use the one that I have, which is going to be my webinar spreadsheet, if I can find it. Did that work? I think I clicked it twice. Yeah, we go. Okay. So that is there and connected. So since I already have the spreadsheet created, I'm just going to show you what I've already done on this spreadsheet. So the first thing you need to do with existing sheets is you need to make sure that you have all of your headers in place already. So line number 1 needs to be populated with the values that you want to then match from Docparser. So you can see I've already got that done. They're all up here. When we then go to map, we can then see those values here on the left, what it is on the Google spreadsheet. And on the right, we're going to match to the rule I created inside of the parser. So on the right, for invoice number, we just have to go find the rule. So invoice number, and then invoice date, bill to. So this is another reason you definitely want to make sure you're naming your rules. Makes it much easier at this point to match when you have them all named correctly. So definitely a good step to take. Payment method. Table description. Table data, line total, and invoice. Okay, sorry, it takes me a second to get through them all, but they are all matched. And if you can see while I was going through, we do get a preview of the data that's being matched from one of the documents that was uploaded. So you can kind of make sure that you have done the right thing. So once we click save and test, it'll then ask us to confirm if we want to send some data to the sheet. We do. It says it worked. So we'll go ahead and click over to the spreadsheet, and you can see it's perfect. We have our rows added in the columns we want them to be added like that. So that is creating the Google spreadsheet. It can be very, very simple to set up. So now what I want to just do is kind of show you quickly what happens when a new document arrives. So obviously I don't have an inbound integration. I'm just going to drag over one more file so you can kind of watch the process happen. So once it's uploaded, it's going to be in the import queue. It's then going to go into our data parsing queue and through the integrations queue. So it already happened. So we can preview again that the data did come out. It looks great. If we then go over to the spreadsheet, those rows were now added as well automatically. All right, so that is it for the demo portion of the webinar. That is creating your first parser and your first integration and all of it. All right, so let's move on here briefly. All right. Okay, so we're going to just move in directly into the Q&A. I did see quite a few questions pop in while people were chatting. I know that Antonio was answering everybody, but yeah, maybe, you know what I'll do? I remember one of the first questions that came up. I'm going to go back and recap how to do that AI parser section. So give me 1 second to just get back there, and I'll share my screen again. Okay, 1 second. Sorry, guys. Just trying to find the question. All right. Sharing again. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead again and recap how to remove the unwanted pages when you're creating the AI parser. And I'm also going to show you how you can do that at any point in any parser. So when you're going to create the new AI parser, it actually just kind of pops up for you automatically. So, but I'll show you in a little bit more detail what the options are. So we're going to use that template. We'll call it that. And I'll go ahead and show you this setting that pops up. So like I said, the default is going to be to keep all pages. We can keep pages based on the keywords. So on a new line for every keyword, you can just type in here what keywords could be on the pages that you want to keep. So like, for example, it could say invoice. We could also keep pages just based on the page range. So if you want to keep pages 1 to 2 or 1 to 4, pages 1, 2, 3, etc. We can also drop pages based on keywords. So the same thing, but we're going to remove the pages that say that. And again, same thing, but remove pages based on the page range instead. So that's how you can do that when you're setting up an AI parser. At any point, you can do this as well in any other parser and determine if there are pages you do not want to keep. So if we just go into the invoice parser that I made, over here on the left, we have our parser settings. So in the parser settings, under pre-processing, we actually have a number of different things that can be modified about the document. So if you're having issues with maybe the OCR of the page, you can modify that. You can add different settings to stretch the contrast of the page, things like that. But we have the same setting for keep and drop specific pages when importing here. So those same settings that I just showed you are available here that you can apply to any parser at any time. All right. Okay, let me see. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to go back in. Okay, so Gopi, I believe you were asking some questions about how to rearrange the columns. So I can cover that as well. So in the rules, if we go back into that table data rule that I made, you can rearrange the columns from within here by using our setting for exchange columns, I believe is what it's called. So just before the end here, if we go in and we check on, which one? Fill, place, and overwrite. So we have copy and move cell content from here. So if you want to exchange the data, it might take a few different filters to try to get everything exactly where you need. But if, for example, I wanted the date to be at the end and the total at the beginning, I would say copy the last column to the first one. Actually, I would say exchange the last one with the first one. And you can see the data has now moved. So anytime you need to rearrange in the table data rule, you can go ahead and just use this exchange cell content and kind of flip everything around so it ends up where you want it to be. Okay, next question. Hold on, let me go through. So Randy had asked, I know we can email files into each parser for processing, but is there a way to have the export emailed back to the user who submitted it? Unfortunately, not necessarily by default. You can have that emailed to yourself, though, with that setting that I showed you for email on completion. Potentially, you could just set up a quick email forward option from your email to somebody else, but I'm not sure if that would be possible to know who submitted it in that case. But there may be other ways using things like Zapier to accomplish that. So if you want to reach out just directly to us with more kind of details, we can go more into that. Maria asked if you can API to make automation. So yeah, you can use the Docparser connection to make if you'd like. You can also just use webhooks to any endpoint as well. So that's definitely something that you can do. Okay. Okay, so Jeff asked, is a direct integration with SharePoint on the development roadmap at all? I don't believe that we currently have anything on the roadmap for that, but I would have to look a little bit more into it. So I will get back to you with an answer on that. Okay, hold on, I'm going to come back to that question from Ari in the section. So Maria asked, what's the cost to API? So there's no additional cost to use API. If there is a cost to use Make, I'm pretty sure there is. I'm not familiar with their pricing, but it would be based on them. You can use any of these features with any of the Docparser plans. So no additional cost to use API at all. All right. Okay. So one question was asked about extractions from keywords that are sent via email. So that actually is a great question and something that I did want to talk about as well. So it's actually my next slide. So we have a sister application that basically is the same team here for an app called Parser. So Parser works very similar to Docparser, but it is designed for emails. So things like the body of the email and stuff like that. So it's a really cool system as well, a really cool app. If you have a use case for things that are trapped in emails, like the body or the subject and things like that, I definitely recommend checking it out. That's at mailparser.io. And for Ari, it would be the best way for you to do what you were asking in terms of looking for stuff in the body of the email. Docparser is not able to do that. All right, so that is talking about Parser. Yeah, so the next thing is just reach out, please. If you're using the app or you get stuck at any point and don't know where to go next, we're always very happy for you guys to reach out where we can jump in there or we can just tell you how to fix it. You can do that at any point just inside the app using the chat icon, or you can email us directly at support@docparser.com. But please feel free. We're always happy to help and get your parsers working as they need to. All right. And if you want more assistance on your own while you're going through, we do have our knowledge base, which is our support article location where you can find answers to any feature, anything that you want to use, any filter inside of the app. And we also have the Academy as well. And the Academy is just a number of videos, short little videos that explain how to use the filters and how to use the app. So at any point you can check that out and use those while you're going through to get better and understand how to use the features and filters inside of the app. And of course, if you want a one-on-one to talk more about your use case or get some more one-on-one assistance, you can schedule a demo at any time as well. So I am just going to be pasting the links inside of the chat. Just give me 1 second to get those in there. So you can follow those links at any point to find those locations, the Knowledge Base Academy and the demo. All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody joining today. I hope this was helpful. Hold on, I'm going to answer Ari's question before we go. So Parser is a lot simpler. It is designed more for the emails themselves. So if you're just looking for stuff from the email itself, Parser would be the right fit for you. If you're looking to parse from PDFs or images or you require OCR, you would need to look at Docparser. So it just kind of depends. If you want to reach out one-on-one and talk more about your use case, I can recommend which app would be better suited for you. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. I really appreciate you coming. I hope this was helpful, and we hope to see you out there using the app. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.